Now, coming back to the specifics of your question, give it to us again here.
Well, it has to do with the individuals who were affected directly and who died during that attack. And with the concept that at some level we choose when we're going to die, that in one sense you've said over and over again that there is no real, that every death is a suicide.
In the sense that it is always chosen,
yes,
vibrationally, yes?
Yes. So I guess I'm trying to capture that idea. When one person dies in an accident, I can see that, or I can understand it. But the magnitude of the number seemed to be overwhelming that concept.
It's an interesting thing. When you contemplate, there were early reports that the occupation of just those two buildings was how much?
Several 20,000 or...
And the number of those who are missing or already discovered as dead is
6,500, something like that.
And so, even as you are measuring those statistics, you're realizing that something was afoot. In other words, as you begin to hear stories of people who were supposed to be there and weren't,
Right.
It is our knowing that if you had access to the personal history of everyone involved, it would be easier for you to receive the answer that we're going to give you here. Now, as you're looking for these vibrational matches, the thing that's tricky about it is that there's a tendency to assume that everyone who makes their transition in a situation like that must not have been vibrating where they were wanting to vibrate. And that is not an accurate assumption either. In other words, when you think about the World Trade Center itself, and you acknowledge that it has been a target before, that there have been experiences there before where trauma has surrounded it before, then it's not difficult to understand that some who are there may be still offering some similar vibration around that. When you think about the turmoil that has been happening around the airlines, when you think about the air rage that has been pulsing, in other words, as you have access to specific information about many factors that all culminated in that, as you address it from your knowledge of law of attraction, suddenly things come more into clear view. Now, since it is not possible for us to take the time to identify the energy of every person, and yet we know it is awkward and uncomfortable for you to just take at face value our words that say law of attraction is always unfolding exactly in accordance with the laws of the universe. In other words, there is never an exception to that. Pinpoint, if you can, in light of what you've just heard from us here, your greatest confusion about this.
I think it's just the magnitude of numbers, which I realize. I think it's just the enormity from...
We are not wanting to diminish the importance of this. And we are certainly not wanting to be disrespectful of that which has happened. But there have been far greater numbers that have made their transition simultaneously than that on many occasions due to cataclysmic events, earthquake activity, volcanic activity. But the biggest difference here is that when it happens of something that you call natural causes, where an earthquake causes a city to tumble down, there is not blame that is immediately associated. In other words, the energy of your planet goes more to the reconstruction and more to the soothing, where in a situation like this, where it feels to so many that there is so much blame to be pointed, that it serves as a stronger, longer catalyst for some to be disconnected. But as far as the transitioning into the non-physical, what is your question about that?
I don't have a question about it, now that you have put out these comments to me.
How would it be that so many would find themselves a vibrational match to something? That's what vibrational matches are about.
Yeah.
The thing that most do not realize is that all of the elements that have culminated in that exaggerated experience have been percolating. In other words, it has been in the making. In other words, you don't just wake up one morning and be vibrating happily ever after and then walk into a situation like that. It does not happen that way. You don't just wake up one morning vibrating happily ever after and find yourself working in a building where previous bomb threats have even happened. There's a sensitivity that is within you that when you are connected to source energy, your sensitivity, sometimes, especially in the beginning, when people think in terms of connecting to source energy, wanting source energy to be a sort of guidance, there is a sort of implied belief that says something like, oh good, now I have guidance. I will be able to watch out for buildings falling down, or I will be able to watch out for pitfalls that might be uncomfortable for me. But as you connect with source energy, what you begin to notice is that source energy is not guiding you away from catastrophe. Source energy is always calling you toward the well-being that you've been asking for. But the big question that we've been asking in this workshop for some time is, but are you listening? Are you receiving? Are you following? And so many of our physical human friends are not reaching for what feels best. They have learned to endure the uncomfortable. And so they are not really keenly aware of their guidance system. Our friend earlier is talking about his supreme sensitivity to energy. And it is no wonder that that is happening with many of you, because the energy is moving so quickly in these days. So Jerry and Esther have been asked by many who have been close to them, because they've been saying for the last several months, we've decided not to fly. And they purchased this monster bus to move about the country in. And last year, they flew some long flights and drove the bus to many others. But this year, when they established the schedule, Jerry established it so that it did not require even one flight. And even as he's scheduled for next year, he scheduled it so that it did not require a flight. So people are saying to Jerry and Esther, did Abraham tell you that this was going to happen? And so you were just wise enough to stay on the ground so that there would be no possibility of any trouble? And they said, no, not at all. We were not running away from catastrophe. We just wanted the comfort of being in control of our own experience. We spent too many extra hours in layovers in the airport. There were too many flights that were canceled that didn't feel comfortable to us. And each time that happened, a rocket of desire shot out of us that said, we want to find a way that we can get around and see all of these people that we love and have these workshops that we feel are of value and have ease about it at the same time. And so the ideas kept unfolding that were leading them to something that felt better and better and better. So what we're getting at here is that as you become sensitive to feeling good, and feeling good becomes your ultimate desire, and you are willing to follow the thoughts and actions and words that feel good as you are speaking them or thinking them or performing them, what happens is you never find yourself, if you're selfish enough to always reach for what feels good, you never find yourself numbed enough that you don't recognize the... Now what happens with many is that even when they get close to something, in other words, all of you could potentially be on your way, even in this moment, to something that would not please you. But what happens is, the closer you get to the culmination of something that does not please you, the more you begin to feel the vibration about it. And so the more you are then be able to make your statements of desire and gently bring yourself into alignment with what you are wanting. And so when something like this happens, we would say that without exception, those that are having the experience are a vibrational match to it. Now, it is not difficult for you in some cases to recognize the vibrational match. And in the cases where you cannot figure it out, we would not spend too much time trying to figure it out, but we would spend time trying to accept the fact that there is a vibrational match in there somewhere. There are some who are very close to pure positive energy, who are exhilarated about the idea of moving on, who did not specifically have things that were calling them here in a very powerful way. In other words, there are endless intentions that are a part of all of that. Sometimes when you look at the fireman or the policeman and you say, it is an extraordinary tragedy, and we say, but are there any among you that are a closer vibrational match to that than those who have made it their life's work to be in the midst of all of that. And you say, yes, but still, it doesn't sound right. Certainly they would not have intended to have an experience like that. And we say, it is not possible for anyone to know what anybody else is feeling or wanting about something. As you watch the funerals and you see the feeling of pride and the feeling of appreciation, there are many very well-intentioned and very well-meaning and very well-acted emotions that are within all of you that add up to these events, you see. So sometimes when something like this happens, and then Abraham says, or anyone who understands law of attraction says, there are no accidents, everything is a vibrational match, then sometimes students of deliberate creation begin to worry because they're not all that sure where their vibration is. How do we know how we're vibrating? And we say, it is our promise to you that you would know. There is not one of you in this room that could have been moving toward an experience like you're describing here and not have some sense of either being powerfully called somewhere else or at least being slowed. In other words, you would literally feel your feeling of at oneness with whatever that activity is. And even as we were talking earlier to our friend about not trying to orchestrate all of it, to just get in a happy place and trust that the universe will orchestrate it, so that there are trains that are late, or there is delay in traffic, or there is something else that is necessary, or there is a telephone call that comes, or there is an impulse or a thought that takes you someplace else. And the most significant thing that we want to say to you is that in the event that you are not in alignment with remaining physical and you are following impulses that make you part of that transitioning into non-physical, there is ultimately no better choice than that. And it is a choice that every one of you will be making at some point in time. The greater thing that we're wanting to talk about when something like this happens is the greater issue, perhaps the greatest issue of all, is the huge cry of no that comes forth from so many of you about the subject of death, which is your inevitable future. In other words, that is the greater discomfort in all of this, that so many are standing in a place and saying, not only do I not want to go like that, I don't want to go at all. In fact, most people are not saying necessarily, I don't want to go like that, because what a way to go. Most people, instead of saying, I don't want to go like that, are saying, I don't want to go at all. I don't ever want to go. I don't ever want to make my transition. In fact, many would say, I'm so sure that I don't want to go like that I will instead, I will contract some slow-moving, deadly disease. And little by little, I will make my decision that I would rather make my transition. In other words, we are not wanting to be unkind here or insensitive to what so many of you are feeling, but we are very much wanting you to put this death thing in the proper perspective. You are all going to die, except there is no death. You're all going to make your transition, you see. You're all going to make your transition into non-physical. It is time to stop making your transition into non-physical sound like a subject that is uncomfortable and begin acknowledging that it is something that happens to everyone, you see. It will help you. Not because we think that there are more airplanes crashing into more buildings and because we think all of you need to be more sensitive to your emotions so that you can guide yourself into safe havens. That is not what we believe at all, and it is not what we're speaking here at all. But what we are saying to all of you is, this death thing is so misunderstood that you use it to torture yourself never-endingly and absolutely unnecessarily.